These are the early Burt Plus Tasty green cucumbers that have now been potted up into their final pot. We've kept them in the lean-to greenhouse for now, just to push them on a little bit, and we'll be putting a cane up soon to support them as they keep growing upwards. Hopefully we'll get some tasty early cucumbers off of these. This is the second sowing of runner beans. These will be going out in the garden in a few weeks' time. We sowed these yesterday and covered them in newspaper just until they germinate. They're just sown in the usual cell trays that we normally sow in, and then they stay in these until they're planted out. They'll stay covered in the newspaper until they start poking their heads through, and then we'll uncover them. We also sorted out the herb garden today, so all of the new plants have been planted for this season. Up this end you can see we've got a couple of mint plants. So we've got 3 different sorts. We've got just common mint in this pot here. We've got apple mint in this one, which is a little bit furrier, the leaves. And then we've got spearmint over the back here, which comes with a slightly lighter green leaf than the just common mint that we showed first. We've then got some lovage plants here, which we grew from seed this year. And then you've got the sage, which we keep each year, and then we just give it a trim its roots up, trim its leaves, and then that should start bushing up again soon. Moving along to the next sink, we've got curled parsley, and then we've got the Italian parsley, which is just a flat leaf parsley, as you can see from the video. And we've got some more sage up the end and some more mint in front. Then we've got 2 sorts of chives. So in these pots here we've got just normal chives, which are kind of cylindrical, their leaves. And then moving along to these ones just in front of me, you've got some garlic chives which have flat leaves. The last herb that we're growing this year is dill. So we've got some here which is coming along nicely. It's been in the greenhouse to start it off. It's coming along nicely. It's just been hardened off now, and now we've placed it outside today. Although we do plan to make a later sowing of this, because we do tend to find that it goes to seed quite quickly. Now as we come into the greenhouse, we've got the dahlia plants here, which will go in the flower beds later on in the year. And then we've got a Nimbus tomato here, which is a new variety. We got it as a free packet of seed from DT Brown, and we've just got 1 plant to try, so we'll let you know later on in the year how we get on with that one. Moving along, we've got some marathon broccoli seedlings here, which would have been pricked out a couple of days ago, sown last week. And then further back we've got our cauliflowers, our usual varieties. We've got Boris to the right, Cornell to the left, and then as we move along, Raleigh on the far left. Back to the front here, we've got Boltardy beetroot. Again, like the ones in the video a couple of weeks back, we just sow a couple of seeds in each cell of the seed tray, and then once they're big enough they get planted out in the garden. We find it works a little bit better than if you just sow the seeds directly in a drill in the garden, because you find you get less misses than if you do that. Then we've got our onion plants here. So there's a variety. Some of them are Marco, which is a white onion. There's Santero, Proteus, and then you've got Kamal, which is a lovely red onion. These will be planted out in the garden in the next couple of weeks, and will hopefully, if they make the size and shape in time, be ripened off for the 250 gram onion class. We do find though that some of them that don't make the grade just get sort of hung up for eating, and as you can see here we've still got some bunches hung up from last year, and they're just fine, they're keeping well there. Moving along the greenhouse, we've got the cucurbits. So we've got a few for ourselves here and then a few friends. We start the plants off for them, so don't worry, we don't grow all of these ourselves. So we've got Cora courgettes, we've got Hunter butternut squashes. Then across the back here we've got Bush baby marrows. And then coming towards the front we've got the cucumbers. So we've got some more Burpless Tasty Green, like the ones we had in the lean-to greenhouse earlier on in the video. And then right at the front here we've got a few Carmen, which will be our first sowing in the lean-to greenhouse. Moving along, we've got the begonia corms. So we'd never tried this before, we'd never grown begonias, but we had them in the flower bed last year. And we understood that you could keep the corms and then grow them again next year. So we potted them up into seed trays ages ago now, and we're actually starting to lose hope for them. They didn't really seem to be doing anything, so maybe we thought we'd done it wrong or they didn't like the way we'd kept them. But as you can see, they are just a few of them now starting to sprout. So hopefully the rest of them will do the same and we'll have some begonias again this year. And then right at the end we've got our geranium plants, which again will go in another one of the flower beds a little bit further up the garden. The Tumbling Tom tomatoes have also been put in their hanging baskets now, and we'll keep them in the greenhouse for a few more weeks until they get established, and then they'll be able to be hung on the garage. Now we're coming along to the pickling shallots, so we've moved these down beside the polytunnel now, where they'll stay until they're harvested, and Mum's just sorting some out now.
At this stage, just removing a few of the dead leaves off of the shallots, and if they can be eased apart, they're just slightly eased apart, and the dead old skin that's down there in the compost is removed as well. If it comes off easily, then it's removed. If it doesn't, then it's left there, and then they're just eased apart at this stage as well. So hopefully we'll get a better shaped shallot. So it's just a tidying up process at the moment, just removing old leaves, really, the old dead leaf there, and then just carefully easing those apart. Another bit of dead leaf there, and then sometimes just to help hold them, just put a bit of compost back down between the ones when they've been eased apart.
Just checking on the progress of the tough ball onions in the polytunnel now. So just to recap, these were the ones that just overwintered in the tunnel, and then we potted them up into these relatively large pots a little while ago now. As you can see, they're starting to bulb up, but it's difficult for us to tell really whether they're coming on or not because we see them every day. But hopefully you think that they're starting to bulb up. Just in front of them here we've just got the spare herb plants, so the ones that we didn't plant out today, just in case we get any fail or any that get affected by the weather up in the sinks, we'll use these ones to replace them. The early little gem lettuce are coming along in the polytunnel now. These are probably one of my favourite plants to watch growing, just because they grow so fast and they're such a bright green colour. And then we've got the tomatoes that are potted up, so we've got some Gardener's Delight, cherry tomatoes, and then we've got some Alicante, which are a larger tomato. And then just in this front pot on the left hand side we've got a couple of Tumbling Toms, which are the tomatoes which are trailing, so the same ones as we've got in the hanging baskets in the greenhouse, but we also quite successfully find they grow in pots, so we've got a couple in there. Then we've got the early potatoes, so these are the ones that we planted in their tubs in February, and we'll probably be tipping a couple of these tubs out later on and having a few more early potatoes for dinner. These are the stump carrots that we've got growing in the small greenhouse down the garden, just to bring them on a little bit quicker than the ones that we've got out in the beds in the garden. The majority of these here are sweet candle, and then just up the end here we've got a few Cazo, which are the ones to grow for the show at Harrogate this year. As you can see, we've now thinned these out, so there's just 1 carrot per station, whereas we started by planting 3 seeds at each station.
Of the garden now to look at the potatoes, and the first ones that went in the main sowing were the Winston, so I've taken the fleece off of those to have a look how they're doing, see if they need any attention. Don't seem to have any misses this year. One just down on the first row there a little bit slower than the rest. Other than that, they're all much the same stage. The row the end here, the block, is some Nadine, and they of course are not quite as far ahead as the Winston. Right, having uncovered them just to see how they're doing, I think they're okay at the moment, but they might need a bit of water in a couple of days, so we'll have to keep our eye on them.
We've got a few salad crops under some clotches here. These, like the beetroot that we saw in the greenhouse a few minutes ago, would have started off both the beetroot and the carrots in little cell trays and then transplanted, and then the lettuces will have been grown on in pots before planting them out as well. We grow them under the clotches just to give them a little bit of protection early on in the season, and hopefully they'll come a little bit sooner and we can have some salad when the weather's nice.
Right, just looking at the 4 rows of earlies, as we call them. As you can see, they're growing well under the clotches now. We normally leave the clotches on until they start to touch, and we'll probably therefore have to take these off maybe next weekend. You see the purple-eyed seedling here are getting a bit close to the glass, and same as with the plastic on the main sowings. Once they start touching the glass, if we get some hot days, it can scorch the leaves. I did actually water these yesterday. Just gave all of them a drink, and they all look quite happy under there at the moment. But we will have to keep our eye on them.
This is the first lot of runner beans planted out in the garden. We planted these out last weekend, and as you can see, we've got them all tabbed up so that we know who their parents were. These will be the seed beans for this year, so it's important that we know where they came from. This is the first bed of brassicas that we've planted out this year. So at this end we've got a few Derby Day cabbages. Then as we move along, we've got some gypsy cauliflowers. So we bought this seed last year. We'd never tried it before, but we didn't get around to growing it, so we sowed a few seeds this year. They didn't germinate particularly well, probably because it was old seed, but we're going to give a few plants a go. And then the few rows towards the left hand side here are Candied Charm, and we've got some Barcelona in there as well. We've planted them under Enviromesh again this year, even though it is a bit of a hassle to put the corral up and get the Enviromesh over the top of it. We do find that it's worth it to avoid having an infestation of cabbage root fly, which can just devastate the whole crop. These are the parsnip holes, so we've just uncovered one row here, lifted the polythene back just to see if there's any coming up. There aren't any showing their heads yet, but as you can see in this hole, when you dig into it, you can see that this seed here has started to chip. It's got a little root coming out, so it won't be long before they're up, and the polythene will have to come off.
Right, we're just going to have a look at some more of the early potatoes. We tried growing some earlies in pots this year just for eating. We've already turned out some Swift, and today we're going to have a look at these Lady Crystal. John Trim recommended Lady Crystal to us to grow as an early potato. It'll be interesting to see how they compare with the Swift. We're turning these out because the leaves seem to be going a bit floppy, as though they're dying back a bit now and ready for harvesting. So we'll turn them out and see what we get, whether we get enough for dinner or not. With some of the Swift, we had a few potatoes on one plant, but they were quite big and amounted to £1, so that was enough for a meal. So we'll see how the Lady Crystal compare. Seem to have quite a few small potatoes here, probably these will be 2 or 3 ounce, maybe 4 ounce. Doesn't seem bad for one root of potatoes. Just been grown in some of the spent potato compost from last year, and other than the occasional water, that's all we've done with them. Just looking at the second one now, see how this one's done. I mean, it's a bit drier, this one, than the last one. But again, some reasonable sized potatoes coming off the root. Interestingly, this was in a slightly narrower but deeper pot. I don't know if that's made any difference. Supposedly had the same attention. There's the original mother potato. Right, we'll see how much in weight we got off of each of these 2 roots of Lady Crystal that we just got out. This was the second root, as it happens, that was grown in the tall, narrow pot, and there's nearly £2 of potatoes there. Now we'll look at the first one. Turned out it's probably slightly less weight here, but I reckon there's still at least £1 of potatoes. Yeah, no, in fact it's not a lot less weight. £1 4 ounces, so just over £1 in this one, which would be enough for a family meal. So it seems well worth growing them in the containers if you want some nice early potatoes.